Hello guys, it's COVID-19 lockdown here in the UK, so might as well do a few jobs on the Porsche that I've been putting off. So the car last year had an advisory on the handbrake, and only just got through on efficiency. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the caliper off, the disc off, and then we're going to have a look at the handbrake the handbrake shoes, the mechanism. And I think because the car's not far off 20 years old, it's probably still on the original handbrake shoes. So I think I'm going to replace those and then set the handbrake back up. So that's the tasks for today. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Alright, so we've got the car up on stands. It's actually supported on the jacking point, which is probably the best place to put the axle stands, to be honest. Handbrake's off. You need to make sure the handbrake's off for this job, otherwise you're going to struggle to move the disc later on. So what have we got? We've got you need a 10mm Allen key, and you really do need to make sure you've got a quality one of these, because these can be tight, these bolts, and the last thing you want to do is be rounding these off. These are like a 10mm Allen key, top and bottom. So I've got a decent one there. You'll need a 10mm socket and ratchet as well. I'll show you why in a minute. And you'll need a screwdriver to take these screws out of the disc when the time comes. The other thing I'm going to do on this car while we're in lockdown and I've got nothing else better to do is I'm going to paint these calipers. I mean, they're actually in good nick, as you can see. There's a bit of the decal missing there. This is the original paint scheme for the non-S. This is a 2.7 2001 Boxster, and they come with a grey Brembo caliper. I'm going to do these in red, just because they're such a nice caliper. They stand out a lot better with a bit of colour on, so I'm going to paint these when I finish sorting the handbrake out. So first things first, what you need to know about is there's actually because this caliper's got a metal brake pipe that comes off the back there, and it goes into this flexible holes here. When you come to lift this caliper out of the way, this is going to damage the brake pipe if we don't release this flexi hose. So there is a 10mm bolt which I've just cracked off and started to wind out behind here, so I'm just going to quickly show you that. Hopefully you can see that bolt there that I've started to wind out. You need to be careful with that, to be honest, that bolt, because what I found was it was actually quite tight, and the last thing you want to do is snap that off. So what I was doing was working the ratchet, just off a little bit, on a little bit, off a little bit, on a little bit, and just working it up and down to loosen that bolt off without snapping it off. So it's a good technique, that just crack it off and then wind it back in again, then back off, back in, back off, and just keep winding it forwards and backwards until it releases the threads, and then hopefully it'll come out. Now these on this car were a little bit dirty inside the actual Allen head, so I had a bit of a scrape out, get all the dirt out of the actual Allen head itself, just so that the socket goes in nicely. And again, with these, you're probably going to find, if they've not been off before, that they're going to be tight. Now, luckily for me on this car, as you can see the condition of the disc, someone actually changed the discs on this before I bought it. So I'm presuming because they've changed the discs, they'll have had these bolts out before. But again, I would err on the side of caution with these. Crack it off, and then wind them forwards and backwards to make sure that you don't. If it feels like it's going to snap, you need to wind it back in if it's getting tight, and then that way hopefully it should come out. So let's see what happens with these. I'll tell you what, they were flipping tight, them. Really flipping tight. I think whoever put the discs on probably used an air tool on these, because they were so fucking tight you wouldn't believe it. But they're coming out. You don't actually need to take the pads out. If you're not changing the pads, it'll just slide off with the caliper. That's the bolts there, quite big. You can see I probably need to clean the ends up a little bit before I put them back. But I mean, decent nick on the threads. So okay, so the flexi part is loose, the caliper's loose, so I'm just going to very gently manoeuvre it off the disc. I'm just going to pop it down there on the suspension just to support it. It'll be fine there. Right. So if you don't know, this is called a disc drum setup, so the drum part is in here, and this is how the handbrake works. Is basically there's a pair of shoes inside here, which when you pull the handbrake they come into contact with the drum, the inside of this part of the disc. When it's working right, it's a good handbrake. Pros and cons. Pros, tends to be more reliable than ones that work on the disc. Ones that work on the caliper, because the caliper ones tend to cause problems when the caliper mechanism seizes, and then the handbrake becomes quite poor. These ones tend to be a bit more reliable, but the downside with these is because they're inside here, they're not as easy to obviously maintain, so the only way is to take the actual disc off. Now there's an adjuster which you can only get to through this hole, and the adjuster mechanism's at the top. And what I need to do is I need to back those shoes off, so that when I pull the disc away it doesn't catch. So you've got to basically fish around in here until you can feel the adjuster. There it is. And if you know if you're going the right way, because if you're going the right way it won't tighten up. If you're going the wrong way it gets tight. I feel they're not catching now. You can hear there's no noise, so that should be alright. There's a couple of screws here, so you need a big Phillips screwdriver. If they don't come out very well, you might need an impact screwdriver to. I've been lucky with them. They've come again. It's had discs on recently. You can see the disc's fairly new. So now we should be able to pull this off. And reveal the handbrake mechanism. There's that adjuster I was telling you about. Actually it's still wound on quite a long way. So you can see the adjuster there. There's a spring, the shoes themselves. There's some spring clips that see there that hold the shoes on, and there's also a spring at the bottom which is going to have to come off as well. And then there's the handbrake cable here, which comes in the back, and then it'll connect on a mechanism at the bottom there. So what I need to do now is I need to take these off, release the springs, wind that adjuster right off, and then we can take, there's actually a lump out of that one, look, there's a lump out of the brake shoe. It actually don't look too bad, but they're about 18 quid for a set, so I'm putting some new ones on, and I can check all the mechanisms free as well while I'm doing that. Sorry, I'm just trying to balance that camera on the tyre. And obviously you've got the inside of the drum, which you can see on this one is a bit rusty, so I'll be cleaning that up with that's where the shoes contact, so that'll need cleaning up with some emery tape as well. So I'm going to wind that adjuster off. Right off so that the springs are as slack as possible. And then I'm going to pop that. I just tend to use a screwdriver for these, and then just like that, and then it releases them. That's that one off. And then I just tend to put them on the floor in the right position that they would go on the vehicle. Probably gonna have to tackle these next. These see if we can hang this light somewhere. Right. So I think what happens with these is they just, you got to push them in and basically turn them, and then it will release. I think it's on like a little, there we go, on like a little hook that goes through the back plate. They're in decent condition. Normally stuff like this falls to bits and corrodes after a long time. I'll do the other side. You're a wasp. There's that one out. Down the floor. Just need to pop that adjuster out the way now. And again, the best thing to do is to keep it as it was, and then put it on the floor so you know how it goes. Or take a photograph as well, which is sometimes one way of doing it. Right. I need a light to get to see what's going on at the bottom. What we can normally do with these is pop them both. That's it, like that. That just takes the tension off the spring. There we go. That's them off. There's the handbrake mechanism. Well, it's all free. That's a good thing. Seems to be free at the pivot end as well, where it goes onto the. Let's have a look at these. So there's the shoes. Let's just take the spring off. See what I've done there is I've just laid them all in the position that they came off. There's a bit of wear. They're not in brilliant shape, to be honest. There's a bit of wear. I don't know if they're original or not. Energies. Don't know if that's the original make or not. They actually look to me like they could have been replaced at some point, because they're not that bad. I'll have to compare them to the new ones when they turn up and see how thick the. I mean, there's a lump out of that one which isn't ideal. Don't know whether I've done that pulling the drum off. I don't think so. I think because I don't know, can't see any of it on the floor. one of the problems that you have with these is, and it's not just Porsches, it's a lot of cars, is where these pins go through. So you see that hole there? That's actually where these returning pins go through. So that goes in there and then you turn it and it locks. But what can happen is, over time, is the back plates starts to corrode, and I think it's actually started to happen a bit on this one, where that hole started to enlarge a bit. Because you can see on that side it looks a better shape, it looks more like how it should be. But this one's starting to enlarge a little bit, and the problem is if it enlarges to a point where that hook so as long as that hole hasn't enlarged too much, I think we can get away with it. It's a little bit enlarged compared to the other side, but I think it'll be fine. So clean all this up now. So we're looking at these contact points here, and here. Same on this side. I'm going to give this back plate a good clean. You can see the contact point here and down here as well for the shoe. Give all that a good clean up. Now the other thing to look at is the mechanism. So I don't know if you can see in there. You can actually see where the handbrake cable, there it is, links onto that, and that should pivot as well, and on mine it does. It isn't seized, but it's quite rusty. Let's see if I can get it. So there's actually two pivots. There's that one as well. So you can see it's nice and free. And then there's the other one in there where the handbrake actually connects onto the end of that bracket. And that's free as well, but it's going to get greased up. A bit of brake grease on it, I think. When it goes back together. So we're also going to clean the inside of this disc because it is a little bit corroded. So we'll give that a bit of a clean up with some emery tape. And then we should be ready to build it up. So I'm going to turn the camera off to clean all this down, and then you'll join me when we're back to reassembly. Hope you enjoyed that. See you in a bit. Right, welcome back to this lockdown project. Just heard on the news we got another 3 weeks of at least of lockdown, so if you're like me and you've got your hobbies, well, at least that's something. Okay, so you can see what I've done is I've cleaned the back plate, and I've actually just given it a little coat of grey paint just to protect it a little bit from any further corrosion. You might think that's a bit of overkill, but it's tidied it up. I've got my new shoes here. And actually looking at the the amount of material that's left on the old ones. I think this was a good decision to replace these, because these are a lot thicker, so there was quite a bit of wear on the old ones, especially at the bottom end of the old shoes. So I'm going to go ahead and start reassembling these, but I want to put a bit of lubrication on the adjuster. I think I'm going to use a bit of spray grease, blast that up where the handbrake lever goes, and then we can test that that's all nice and free when we've reassembled it. So I'm just going to pop you there, and we're going to go and get a bit of spray grease. I think a little bit of spray grease on that pivot will be nice. And I might top that up when that's finished with a bit of brake grease as well. Got a bit of this stuff here. This is Mintex Sara, which is an advanced lubricant for brake system. It says there, prevents corrosion. Back in the day, I used to use a lot of copper slip, but things have improved a bit now. This is a bit better. I think copper slip used to dry out a lot easier. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting a bit of this on the contact points of the where the brake shoes contact the back plate. Just going to put a bit of that on the bottom there as well. Pivot. Just get that off my hands. Sip of tea. Can't beat having a bit of tea. Right, see if we can remember how this goes back together now. It's been a few days. Well, that's the other thing I'm going to do actually. Is I'm going to lubricate this adjuster. Just going to put a little bit of grease on the threads. So this little adjuster I've basically greased inside there so that that slips nicely, and I've greased the threads, so that's ready. I think what we need to do now is we need to locate the bottom spring, so I'm just matching these up with the shoes to make sure I've got them the right way around. So that, and that one. So if you remember when I took these apart, the way to do it is obviously in reverse order, so I'm going to locate the bottom in first. Let's see if we can get this spring to play ball. So I think actually it might be an idea. I'm just going to try. Well, I'm just going to try putting a spring on and then. The top tip is to always leave one side screwed together because it's a reference, and I've just been around the other side just to double check the routing of this spring, and it actually goes above the adjuster. Just want to try and capture this technique for you here. So I've got the spring on that end already. Going to locate into the bottom there. I'm then going to hook that spring into this side, so all the tension's off, and then you use the spring, the shoes themselves then to actually bring it around and into position. Oops, just caught on the, just wasn't quite in the right place there. That's it. So there we go. Oh, caught my glove. Try again. That's better. There we go. And that's got the bottom mechanism and spring into position, and they won't actually go anywhere now. They'll probably be quite stable while I pop the top adjuster back in. And the top spring isn't anywhere near as strong, so we should just be able to locate that. Just going to put a tiny bit of grease in that end as well where it contacts. So that's the adjuster in. So I'm just going to pop that top spring back in now. Excuse me. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to put these fellas back in now, because I think if I try and put that spring in, I'll risk the whole thing and faulting the bits again. So I'm going to secure the shoes now with these. You might remember these before. They basically go through the hole and then what you've got to do is you've got to discovered a technique for these. If you use a big Phillips screwdriver through the wheel stud hole, you can actually press them in and turn them to where they need to be, which is nice. And actually I just want to show you what you need to be looking out for on those, because it's important that you get them in the right position. There you go, you can see that hook that's come through the back plate, and then I've turned it 90 degrees so that it's grabbing onto the through the hole and holding the. So all that's left now is the top spring. That's bent. Just notice that that's bent a little bit. Right, let's have this on. That's quite there. So one final inspection. I've got the other side together now. So that's that side. And you'll notice I've actually cleaned this hub up a little bit. This because there was a bit of rust on here, and what you want is that to be where the disc contacts this hub. That needs to be nice and clean. So you can see I've just emery taped it a little bit. I've moved the adjuster out a little bit, just because it tends to be out a few threads anyway. And then what we're going to do is offer the disc up and just pop some covers on. I'm going to put those set screws back in. Okay, it wasn't quite in the right position. These are offset. I think that's it. Because these will just hold the disc in the right position for adjusting. So at the moment we're not getting anything catching there at all. So what I'm going to do is just go through the hole, find the adjuster. I'm going to do this by feel really. Just keep rocking the drum. And then it's starting to tighten up now. So it's what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get it until the drum locks. It's starting to get tight now. It's starting to lock now, so I'm going to go the other way and just back it off a couple of clicks. And then what we're going to do now is I'm going to pull the handbrake on a couple of times to settle those brake shoes into place. Feels a lot better already, got handbrake. It's got a about where I want it, which is about 3 clicks. You can just see them just starting to catch. See, that's a bit too tight, that. Just a tiny bit too tight. So it's this one, to be honest. That is where I want it. You can hear it just kissing the inside of the drum. So I'm going to do the same on the other side. So the other side's done. Handbrake comes up 3 clicks and it's absolutely solid on that one and solid on the other side. So that is a new set of handbrake shoes on there, which should be much better. Bit fiddly, but it's done now. So the next thing, I guess, is bolt the calipers back up. And the handbrake in mine it's exactly where I want it. It's 3 clicks and it locks the back wheels, but that might not be the case for your car. So I want to show you something. You need to go in here in the little centre console, and there's a rubber insert which you pull out, and then there's a screw down there, which is actually a let's have a look. It's a T15, I believe. One of these. Take that screw out. Once that's screw out, you can see where the cables come into this compensator. And you can see the two nuts there. You need to slacken both of those nuts off to release the tension on the cables. Double check that your shoes that I've just been showing you on the adjustment, the discs, make sure that those are set correctly where they're just touching the disc. And then what you want to do is you want to be coming back to the cockpit here, pulling the handbrake on for 3 notches, and then you can tighten that cable there until it's just pulling on the handbrake cable, and that should then set your cable up properly if you've got problems with the amount of movement in your handbrake. So I'm just going to pull the handbrake now and you'll get to see what happens down here. You can see there the handbrake's pulling so it'll be these two, well, one's a lock nut, the other one is the adjusting nut, and if you've not got the correct movement in your handbrake, then you can adjust the cable here. Okay, I can't think of anything else that you'd need to know. You see it doesn't move much, it's just enough to pull them shoes and then your handbrake's set up. Thanks for watching, guys. Good luck with your handbrakes. There is actually a great little website on pelicanparts.com, and they do have quite a lot of instructions for adjusting or carrying out jobs on the Boxster. And there is one for the handbrake, and it talks about starting off with slackening off the cable inside the cockpit, like I've just shown you there. It's what they're saying is if there's any tension on those cables, then you're going to struggle to adjust the brakes, the handbrake at the back of the car. I didn't have that problem on mine. The handbrake was working reasonably well. It was just borderline on the actual performance on the MOT, like I said at the start of the video. So this talks here about loosening the two nuts, like I said, making sure there's some slack in the handbrake cables, and then going into the disc, adjusting through the bolt hole, and you're looking for those shoes to be just touching inside of the disc. And then when you've got to the point where you adjust it and the disc locks, you then back off. It's recommending 9 clicks on here. I don't know whether you'll be able to hear the clicks very well, but just back off the adjuster so that the brake shoes are not catching, and then you can go back inside the cockpit. Pull the handbrake a couple of times to seat the cables, and then finally pull the handbrake up. It says 2 notches here. I said 3. Depends how tight you want your handbrake. Somewhere between, 2 to 4 I would say, and you'll be fine. So pull the handbrake up until it's somewhere between 2 to 4 notches, and then tighten up the cables using the nuts. And what you want to be doing is tightening each of these nuts to the point where there's just a little bit of slight resistance on each of the 2 rear wheels. Release the lever, make sure the wheels are spinning freely. But fully locked when the handbrake is pulled up 2 notches. Well, I'd actually say is pulled up a few notches past the 2 clicks. So somewhere between 2 to 5. Mine's on 3 at the moment, and that's locking the wheels. And then it should be set, so you just need to be tightening your lock nuts after that. Anyway, you can have a look on that Pelican Parts website and have a read for yourself. But in my experience, you shouldn't need to touch the adjuster inside the car unless somebody has messed up the cable adjustment in the previously. It should be somewhere near. I think the only time you would have a problem is if the handbrake was still seemed to be coming up a long way after you've adjusted the shoes at the back. You might need to start again and follow this guide. Right, just getting the old caliper bolted back on now. Just putting a bit of grease on these bolts, the one for the flexi pipe. Just so they come out a bit easier next time. I'll tell you what, I'm not gonna lie, it's been a bit fiddly this. It's but I'm glad there's nice new shoes on the handbrake now, to be honest. It's peace of mind, I think. And I'm looking forward to cleaning all this down with a bit of. I think I might use a bit of wet and dry because they're not heavily corroded or anything, just to key up these surfaces, and then hit it with some red paint and some new decals, and then we'll see what it looks like. I might do a little. I recommend a torque wrench for these because mine were over tightened. 63 pounds foot-pounds according to the internet. You can't beat the knowledge that they're tight enough.